Cam Meekins Show. It's your boy Cam Meekins. Matty Harris in the building, mixed by Matty. Man of many names, many qualities. Thanks for doing this, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, bro. I love it. It's awesome.
Before we get into it, I mean, you and I are really close. We've been close for a long time, but I want to introduce the listeners a little bit about who you are, what you do. How would you describe yourself these days?
These days, mostly all I do is mixing and mastering. It's always been my love. I produced too. I don't do that anymore. As you know, I used to make beats. We worked on a lot of songs together over the years.
Yep.
And I guess it was 6 years ago now. I was burnt out on making beats, man. I was doing the songwriting thing in LA and making, records every day. And it wasn't really for me. And I knew I was a good producer, but I didn't know if I was a great producer and if I had the passion to go there, I guess would be say. It was kind of a dark time. What I did know was a lot of the studios were closing and, a lot of people were recording at home. And so the problem with that was there wasn't anyone with any sort of experience to mix the songs or master them for people recording at home. So I thought, this might be an idea, is to start an online mixing and mastering company where I can help artists who are recording at home get their products to sound good before they take them out to Spotify and the other streaming services. So on a whim, I put this website together and started the company, and it started taking off. And now it's what I do every day, all day. And life is good,
So you kind of just saw the trend of people recording at home and said somebody needs to figure out how to kind of help people mix their songs and everything like that. How did that idea come about? Yeah,
exactly. Well, it really just came out of adjusting to changes, in the world we live in, and any time you live in it, things change, and if you're not with the change, you'll be left behind, right? So I saw what was happening was everyone was getting a computer and an audio interface and starting to record themselves at home, which was going to change and was changing the way things had happened since I first started in the music business. Was people would go to the studio, record their song, get it mixed, all that, all within a studio place, but that was changing. So no longer would the artist have to go to the studio to actually record. They were doing a lot of that at home. So, I was like, well, they're not going to have someone to mix it. You know what I mean? So
yeah, right.
It's all going to sound like trash. So I'm like, well, if they could have it mixed online by a guy in LA, even if this kid's in Omaha, Nebraska, then how much better will his music be than everyone else in his neighborhood? You know what I mean? So that was my thought was, people will still have to get someone trained to get their song mixed. And so that's where the idea sprung from.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you pivoted like that. And I want to tell people a little bit about the history there too, because obviously you and I have worked together for so long, and I think some people know it and some people might not. And the history of when you were going by Matty Trump and producing, and you produced Sam Adams' whole first album, Boston's Boy, and you were living in Boston, and then you and I met, and I was 16, 17 years old when you and I met. And I want to tell that story real quick because that's a great story. So Sammy Adams was like popping off. This is probably I guess that would have been 2010.
Yeah.
Right when Boston's Boy came out. And so you guys were killing it with that. And that was really the thing that people my age were just listening to. I remember going to I think it was junior prom or some shit like that and listening to that song. And every suburb kid in Boston was just going crazy about that album. And that was right at the same time that I was starting to really take music serious too. And so I was just spam emailing Sammy, people that worked with Sammy. I emailed you and I was like, I'm doing this music shit. I got to find a studio to record and kind of take what I'm doing to the next level. Can we get together and make some music? And you were like, yeah, sure. Come to the studio, Cyber Sound Studio in Boston. We'll do a session. I'll produce a song with you, and we'll make something happen. And I think you were looking at it just as like a lot of things, just a random opportunity to charge for a session and make a song. But we ended up striking a friendship and making music. And I'm curious what that was like for you. For me, it was this huge experience because I'd never been in a recording studio. I'd never worked with anyone professionally. I'm seeing you as this dude who just produced every track on this album that's blowing up. And we made that song Just Like You the first time we ever got together, which, you know, the old Cam fans know as like this throwback song. And I was just like, this shit is fucking awesome, dude.
Yeah, man, that was a weird time. I mean, that album really like changed my life in a lot of ways. It was the first thing to kind of really put me on the map as a producer or mixer or whatever. I was everything on that.
Yeah.
And, you know, got me a lot of contacts, got me out to LA. So that album changed my life in a lot of respects. And then I met you, and yeah, you know, and I think you can ask this of anyone who's been in the music business a long time. A lot of your work is independent work, and then unless you're like, you know, like a few of the top guys, a lot of the work is independent artists you're working with, hoping that they'll get a record done, you know what I mean, or blow up or something like that. And then you have like,
you're saying, when you're a producer, when you're an engineer, you're just kind of putting those feelers out and trying to see.
Yeah. And then you have the couple things that hit, you know what I mean? I have 3 or 4 records that I can always top off, you know, name off, that are things I worked on that hit, that have propelled my career the whole time. You know what I mean? So, you know, you'll be working on a bunch of stuff, and 1 or 2 things will hit, and that will help push you along. You know what I mean? So when you came in, one, it's, you know, it's opportunity to make money, because I do charge to record and I do charge to produce and all that stuff. And then 2, you were actually really talented, which was cool, you know?
Thanks, buddy.
And I was like, this kid's dope. You know what I mean? And so, you know, I'm always down to build with people that are dope. And so, you know, we started hitting it off, and at the time you were cool. And then, you know, we developed a pretty good friendship to a point where we're like brothers now, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, it just became, I mean, we could do a whole timeline of the story, but, and maybe we should to a certain degree, but yeah, I mean, I feel like making that early music, getting that education of what it's like to be in a studio, that was huge for me. And then it started to just progress. And I think there was a moment in the Northeast where, because of the record that you guys made with Sammy, I think there was really a moment with that subgenre of music where these blogs were kind of pushing all of these different new artists like myself after Sammy, and then Chris Webby and all these other guys that were really starting to come up around that time. And it became this real unique era. And then I got the record label interest because my name started kind of floating around a little bit. And so I remember when I got the email from Atlantic Records that they wanted to take a meeting with me, the first thing that I did was call you. And we weren't fully like working together in a management type of capacity at that point, but we were just doing a lot of songs, and I didn't know what I was doing because I was literally still 17 years old at the time.
Right.
And so I called you, and you were moving out to LA for different reasons, right? At the same time. And so it's just funny. Yeah. It's funny how things kind of just happen like that, you know?
Yeah, it was really weird, man. It was a crazy time. And, you know, it was for both of us, really, it was our first introduction to the major label world of the music business. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it was exciting, dude. I mean, I had signed a management deal. I had one of the top lawyers in the music business. I was moving out to LA thinking, man, I had made it. I'm here, baby. Like, this is it, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Only to find out when you get to LA, you just starting, you know what I mean? And it took both of us, you know, a year or so of a lot of like rough days
for sure
to learn that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That we weren't really shit, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you had a record that did pretty well. Who cares? You know what I mean? And that was a learning experience for both of us of like how the label world works, you know?
Totally.
And things turned out completely differently than I pictured in my head when I got out to LA, you know?
Well, and what's interesting, I think, about both of us is that we both went through that experience. We both, you know, did different deals with labels. And then for my album, you were involved in that deal for the Lamp City album too. Right. And now both of us are running our own thing independently away from that whole infrastructure because
of our experience.
I think we both kind of understood that, you know, there's only certain kind of types of artists that benefit from that infrastructure.
Yeah, man. And I think that was part of the reason I started the mix and master my song site was I was so burnt from trying to play this label game, like it was tiring, dude, and it was depressing sometimes, and I wanted to get back to working with independent artists. Like that's for me, working with independent artists is almost like what I love. It's like it's just me
Yeah.
and the artist working on a song. There's not like six A&Rs on the email chain, all with an opinion. That to me, a lot of times when I work on label stuff, I love working with the labels on a mixing side. I love mixing for the labels now. Producing was always tough, man, because there was always like six guys on the email chain. And by the time like everyone put their 2 cents in, like I hated the song. You know what I mean? I was tired of the song. The song sucked,
Yeah.
And so that the creative juices of being in that system is tough, man. I mean, I know some people thrive on it, and we got boys like Lou and them who are fucking crushing, but for me, it was really tough mentally to deal with,
Well, anyone that's crushing it though in that world is still creating their own thing though. They created their own infrastructure and they still have the relationships from the label standpoint, but they're still pretty in-house.
Yeah, and that's the
to
thing.
do anything
If you
great,
go into
it's
the
got to be
labels,
in-house.
if you go into the labels with already selling out big time shows and stuff like that, then you have all the cards. It's when you're in some sort of development deal that it can kind of mess everything up.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember those darker times when we were first out here because we hadn't gotten the label deal. What happened was I was under the impression that I was moving out to LA and was going to sign a deal. And then it was like 6 additional months of negotiating the whole entire process without signing the deal.
Right.
And so I went out to LA with not a lot of, resources or money or anything. And, there was a point there where you and I we moved in together into one apartment.
Yeah, dude, your resources were better than mine. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what people don't understand. Like I moved out here on a great deal. I had a $50,000 deal just to move out. You know what I mean? And that was from the independent label from Sammy's independent label, first round. And so that first year was dope. They got me a studio. I had money. I was chilling. And then, it worked out that I had enough credits that I was going to be able to sign a publishing deal. And that would take me on after that. And plus we had your deal getting worked on. You know what I mean? So I was like, oh, we'll be good. But my just like your deal, my publishing deal took a year and I was broke, man. I had to move in with you on your freaking kitchen floor. All right. So we got like the #1 record on Sammy's and Cam's about to sign a record deal with Warner Brothers and I'm sleeping on a floor. And so
on an air mattress on a floor an
air mattress on a floor
in a 1-bedroom apartment that someone else was already also living in too.
Right. So that's the whole thing. It's like you think like it's all there, but like that's where we were. You know what I mean? We had record deals, and that's how we were living.
Yeah.
So it's like that old thing. If you don't really love this music business, and if you don't really love making music, man, go find a different job, because like I was all in no matter what,
Right.
And I stayed on your floor so that I could keep paying the rent at the studio. Like I sacrificed a room and a bed so I could have a studio. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it was crazy time, but yeah, dude, that shit was depressing.
Yeah.
But made us better and stronger,
For me too. I mean, I was young, so I think I had more of a tolerance to it because I was like, whatever, I don't give a fuck. Like I'm 18 years old. I'm just like bumming this shit out. We were eating peanut butter and jellies and, splitting Subway sandwiches and really just grinding it out. But I think that built a lot of character for me at the time. You probably already built that character and you were like, fuck,
I was like, dog, I thought I was done with this lifestyle.
Yeah, you were like, I think I've had enough of this, but yeah. I look back at those times now, and I'm just like, that's really where I got my education of the music business and just kind of just how things work in general in life,
Mm-hmm.
And so those were as hard of the times that they were good times for me in terms of the learning experience.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's what they always say. You know what I mean? Like, pain is the best way to learn, success.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but I think when you're looking at getting into that world and you're thinking that it's all just once you do one thing, you're on, and that's kind of where my head was at. Once I got interest from a record label, I was like, all right, cool, I'm Drake.
Yeah.
Like
no, 100%.
And I was incredibly naive too and young. But that's, I think, a lot of ways like kind of what they want you to think too. You know what I mean? Like they kind of gas you up.
Yeah.
I got gassed up a lot when I first started like negotiating the label deal and everything. And so it really gave me a clear understanding of kind of what a label really is and isn't. And now I think it's 2021. That information is out there a lot more. It's just a lot more widely available now. And there's guys like Russ and all these independent artists that are like being very transparent about what a label is and what a label isn't and why you might need a label or why you don't need a label. But back in 2011, which is when we were doing that really wasn't the case. It was still the idea of signing a record deal was still the number one thing as an artist. And Sammy was the only thing to do anything independent, really.
Yeah, the independent world was just starting. I think if you knew someone, you could get your records on Spotify. You know what I mean? Like that whole world was just starting. So it wasn't like you could go to DistroKid and upload your album to every streaming service. There were barely any people listening to streaming at the time.
Well, yeah, it wasn't even streaming. It was iTunes Store.
Yeah, it was iTunes Store. And like you had to know somebody to get on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was a freaking really different world then. So yeah, I think like the new generation of artists, kids that are just coming up, like dudes are so lucky in one respect that you can make a song and release it that same day to the world, right?
Right.
That's really freaking cool. Like if I could have done that as a kid, there would have been a lot of bad songs out there. But that's also the other hard part about it. Everyone can go do that. You know what I mean? Everyone can go and release a song to the world, which one is powerful because you can do that, but two is a negative because there's so much music and content out there and we're consuming at such a higher rate now that a lot of stuff can get lost or not even ever heard,
Yeah. It's hard for stuff to cut through now unless it really has a clear story behind it.
Yeah.
Like I've put out a lot of music in the last year, but when you put out something that has more of a narrative behind it, more of a story, people are more down to check it out because you're just scrolling now, and there's just a million different things you can consume, music, videos, whatever. And so to cut through now, it has to be more than just, I put out a new song. It has to be, why am I actually going to take the time to check out what you're doing here as opposed to checking out this thing or just going on TikTok or Instagram and just scrolling endlessly at random stuff that is just like instant gratification.
Yeah, man.
Definitely changed.
It's so hard too. I get I get anxiety when I open up Spotify because I don't know where I'm like, where am I going to start? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like, unless I have a song I want to hear, a lot of times when I go on, like when I turn on my streaming platform, whatever one it is, like I'm like, oh, I'm gonna listen to this record, or I'm looking to find what's new. You know what I mean? Like what's hot. And it's just, it can be overwhelming even, you know what I mean? There's so many options now that my brain just goes like scattered.
Yeah. At this point, I don't really feel like I'm listening to new music. I think I hear new music through TikTok and Instagram and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's very rare for me that I'm like going and listening to new music. I'm pretty much just listening to what's already in my repertoire from the last like years because it's a little bit overwhelming how much music there is out there.
Yeah, I try, and I think mostly I do this because I am a mixing and mastering guy and I want to be ahead of what's next. You know what I mean? So like, my effects sound fresh. They don't sound like the guy, my effects that sounded 5 years ago.
Right.
So I'm always like checking out what's new. I constantly check like the indie hip hop stuff and things like that, just to hear it, just to be like, oh, this is changing. You know what I mean? Because if you don't change with it, then you'll get left behind. So like, that's why a lot of times when I do go to Spotify, it's for that reason,
So tell me a little bit more about how you made that transition from actually trying to chase the major label producer world of getting placements and working with A&Rs to get your beats placed with different artists, to then seeing that there was this void in the market that you wanted to start your own business. I mean, to go out and go fully entrepreneurial from when you were on this seemingly pretty good path with relationships in the music world, why make that shift, and what inspired you to do it?
Yeah, man. I mean, there was a whole bunch of reasons. I mean, I got out here and the Sammy thing, which should have gone, fell apart. You know what I mean? Things just kind of all went in different places, and Sammy went one way. I stayed back in another way. And then, we did your deal, and that was a weird experience, even though, great music came out of it, and you continued to be a great artist. And then, I did the thing with Kelly Clarkson, and then, there was a bunch of good stuff going on, but then it just kind of was like, damn, man, like every day I sit here and I make a beat, and they send the writer from Sony over, and we write a song together, and it's okay, but it's not great.
I think you should tell the Kelly Clarkson story if you're down to tell it. I mean, if you don't want to tell it, that's fine. But I feel like you should tell that story, because I think it gives people more of an understanding of what the actual songwriting world is, because I don't think a lot of the general population understands that.
Right.
The idea of songwriting and being a producer and all these things, it's an incredibly egregious world to me. And I have a lot of friends who are some of the most talented artists and songwriters in the world. And you're one of those talented, creative people too. And the whole entire major label system and publishing system is set up to screw great, talented songwriters over and take that talent and give it to, artists that have the whole package, which is great. And I think that is how things are going to always be. Like, if you're going to push an artist as a major label, obviously you want to have the whole package behind somebody. But there's a lot of, and I'm not just saying this just to like shit on the major labels or big corporations or whatever. It's just the reality of the situation, is that what happens is you get a really talented songwriter or producer, and if you're a publishing company or label, you give them a tiny bit of money, and they think that it's a big deal, but really that money has to last them years and years before they ever see any other money from what they're doing. And you're telling this person to write all this music, and then they have full control to do whatever with that music and give it to different artists and different people. And to me, it's just such an ass backwards system. I think songwriters get taken advantage of the most in the music industry,
Yeah.
And writers and producers.
Thing. It's a weird thing. And maybe just take a step back, like you said, to tell people how this all works. So most of the top artists you hear on the radio, the pop artists, the Rihannas and Kelly Clarksons and stuff, don't actually write their own songs, unless it's maybe, I think Taylor writes her own stuff, but whatever. And so what they have is songwriters, right? And, there's a bunch of people. There's guys that just make the music. There's guys that just write lyrics. There's guys that do top line, which is singing over the music and making the melodies. So these people, which I was one for a while, just sit in the studio every day and we write songs. You know what I mean? We can go, hey, we're going to write one for this artist, or just write a song in general and see who we think it might work for, right? So that's what I got shipped out here basically to do, right? Was to write songs for other artists and in rappers and make beats and try to get beats placed. You know what I mean? And at one point with like the Kelly stuff, like the song was already written, right? There was a song written, What Doesn't Kill You Makes You Stronger. And my manager at the time said, hey, this is a great song, but they can't get it placed because the production's just not quite there. Will you be willing to reproduce it, with meaning the beats and stuff, and then maybe we can get it placed? I was like, sure, no problem. Like, I was down to do anything. I had just moved out and I'm getting an opportunity already. This is sweet. So I reproduced the beat, made it tight, sounded really like Lady Gaga-ish, because that was the sound at the time. And then they sent it, and then Sony took it and said, we love this. We're going to use it for Kelly Clarkson. Now, the problem for me on that was the song had been written already, and all the writers said that they would give me some money on the back end, which never actually happened. And that was like, music business lesson 101. If it's not on paper.
Right, but like let's step back. I mean, how does that even happen, right? You completely redid this song. Some other people wrote the original lyrics and the melodies and everything, but you actually produced the version that ended up coming out. yet
Well, slightly.
you
They
weren't
took the
credited.
song and kind of reproduced it to be more Kelly-ish, whereas I was like maybe a Lady Gaga record. It was more rocky when it came out. I mean, I
Sure.
heard things that I had done in the actual song,
Right.
played differently or with a different instrument, but yeah, no, it sucked, man, for sure. And but that is what it is. That's the business. If you aren't on that paperwork that you
Yeah.
were a writer, you're not getting anything. And I
Well,
should have,
that's
if
my
I had
point.
a little more clout or I'd been around longer, I would have been like, nah, I'm not doing that unless I'm a writer on this song. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, but you shouldn't be expected to necessarily know that going into
Right,
it. But
right.
that's my point is that the whole system is really set up economically to take advantage of the talent, and
Yeah. And
it's
that's the thing
tough.
too, man, with these publishing deals, like my publishing deal, and I'm still signed, is for 4 songs, right? So
Right.
you hear that and you're like, oh, dude, that's nothing. I can make 4 songs, get them placed, we're done. But here's where that changes, right? They invite so many people to write hooks and change the beat that if you look at the writers on a lot of big songs, there's like 10 to 20 people on that list, right? So what that turns out to be is 1/10 of a song. So if I, worked on it, but they'd label the CEO, head of the label decided to bring 10 other guys to try different hooks, and they used a couple lines for each one of those guys. Well, then I got 1/10 of a song. So really what that 4-song publishing deal could mean is 20, 30 songs that you'd
Because it
have
has
to
to be
get placed
100% credits.
before it's 100% of a song,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So like
That's wild.
that's crazy, right? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I didn't
And
even know
and
that.
and that's the other thing that I was like, dude, there's just so many people writing, there's so many people getting on one song. It's like I had a kid, I had another one on the way, and that was one of the determining facts was like I don't want to do this anymore. It's killing my soul sitting here writing a song every day that I'm not really that passionate about. And
Yeah.
I always loved mixing, which was just I get a song that day, I work on it, I make it sound dope, and I send it out, and it's pretty much done. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I liked completing things, and just mixing to me is more fun than sitting there and making beats. I think I just made way too many beats in my life that I kind of got tired of doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I want to be clear. I love free markets. I'm a capitalist. I think that businesses should be able to compete and do what they need to do to kind of, make as much money as they can. I think that, up to an extent, that's really important for all of us to kind of exist and work together. And so I'm not just saying like, oh, like poor songwriters, this shit is like so fucked up, like they're getting taken advantage of. But the point is that it's just really fascinating when you peel back the layers and you see that some of these incredibly talented, creative people are getting taken advantage of. And if they took those efforts and made their own music or made a YouTube channel or, did something like you ended up doing, creating your own business off of it, economically, you're just so much better off 9 times out of 10, unless you
Yeah.
happen to become one of those 0.1% songwriters that gets the placements on the biggest records that ends up making money out of it. But even in that sense, I know guys who have Grammys who are not doing that well financially.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you do too. And so, that's what I think is so funny is that these are guys who are 100 times more talented than me or any other artist that I know or whatever. And it's just a shame to me to see their talent being taken advantage of by, some random A&R publishing company when I really personally believe that, if they kind of pivoted and thought, let me put this on YouTube or let me, make Instagram videos doing piano or whatever it might be, the sky's the limit there. And the upward potential there is endless. You can only make so much in the songwriter publishing world. And I think the old allure of being with a record label and, the name of these labels kind of brings people in, brings these songwriters in. If you go to some music school and then you get approached by a label and become a songwriter, you think like, this is really cool and I can work with some of the biggest artists. But, I just hate to see it because I think these people are so talented and could be doing so much more on their own in a lot of instances.
Yeah. No, I mean, but there's the draw. It's kind of like winning the lottery ticket. You know what I mean? Like you want to be one of those guys. Like I want to mix the next Drake album. You know what I mean? Like, but the reality is like, 1% of the guys do 90% of the songs, and that's mixing, that's mastering, that's producing, and even songwriting to most extent. And so that's just the reality. And I think, if you really love writing songs, then 100% you should come out here and starve and try to make it. You know what I mean? But I think everyone always just has to really do a gut check. Is like, do you really want to be an artist? Do you really want to be a songwriter, or does it just look cool? You know what I mean? Like, because and I know, because we lived through it and we went through the other side of it, that we love doing what we do.
Yeah, but the problem is these guys sign contracts before they're able to do that due diligence.
Right.
Because
yeah.
it's represented to them.
That one hit and you sign the deal and you're a rack. You know what I mean? I get that.
Yeah. That's what I'm identifying as the problem is it's misrepresented by these companies, and then they sign their rights away for anything they would ever write ever.
Right.
And then by the time they understand how the business works, they've already signed that contract.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important for us to have these conversations. Yeah, it's important for us to have these conversations. It's important for people, like Russ and all these other guys that speak out about this type of stuff to just be transparent about it, because I think a lot of songwriters, a lot of artists wouldn't necessarily sign the deal if they could think a couple years ahead and think about, well, what if I just leveraged my own social media? Or what if I was a songwriter and I didn't sign a publishing deal, but I just tried to find the best up-and-coming talent and did it that way and tried to be a writer in that way, being a part of something that's growing, which is how most of these guys who you're saying are the top people who do everything, that's how most of them made it anyways too. Drake uses all his in-house guys. Like, any huge artist for the most part typically has their own in-house people.
Yeah.
Right.
It's tough, man. I mean, we both went through it. It's like when you are a young guy and you don't have any money and you're like, you know what I mean? Like someone throws you like, hey, I'll throw you $100,000, come sign this deal.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. No problem. Whatever. Like I'll figure all that other stuff out later on. You know what I mean?
$100,000 sounds like a lot of money.
Right.
When it's one check,
Yeah.
And that's the classic problem.
The other part you don't realize
work.
too is you're only getting 20 and the rest is going to your album.
Yeah, right. Well, there's a lot of problems there, but anytime you're doing anything, and it's not just music. I think this applies to anyone who's doing contract work, right?
Yeah.
You get that big check, but you don't know when that next check is coming.
Right.
Sometimes it's years. And then all of a sudden, if it's 3 years, $100,000 isn't as big of a check anymore.
Not at all. It's like working at McDonald's.
$33,000 a year. That's below minimum wage.
Right. Yeah, man, there are a lot of flaws in the system, but I think it's cool nowadays. Like, I started my business and I'm doing really, really well. Like, I'm going to be honest, I'm doing really well. And, I support my family and all that, just mixing music now. And it's an amazing. And then you take a look at yourself where you're doing really well and you're an independent artist on your own. Like I use you as an example all the time. When younger guys ask me about, getting a deal and doing all this stuff, I go, you got to understand, like the world's changed now. Like you can honestly be what I like to call like a blue collar musician, right? You could be, an artist that does well, but you're not driving Bentleys and shit. You know what I mean? Like, but you're surviving, you're making a good living, you're doing your music and you're living your life. Like that's a viable option nowadays. Like, honestly, I always think it's like, you only need like 10,000 fans or maybe a little more to like stream your music and, go to your shows if you do a little bit of a tour and you can make a living, you know what I mean? And I think that's what's really cool now. Like you don't need the label. You don't need a label at all. And you don't even have to be well known, but you could still make a good living. You know what I mean? And so that's what's so cool about the way things are now. You can release your own music. You can go do your own social stuff. You can get your boys to shoot your videos. Like you can do it all on your own now and make a living, And so that's what I love about the way the business is now.
Yeah, me too. I mean, that's awesome to hear that you talk about what you and I went through as an example. I mean, I'm humbled about that. I think that now more than ever, it's possible to make a good living figuring out whatever creative thing you want to do, and not just music, anything, And I think that's so inspiring. And I think that has so many ripple implications for just the future of our life.
Yeah.
You know, as humans, how do we interact with each other? You know, we don't need to make physical things as much as we need to just like provide services and art and, you know, our own ideas to the world. And we're all consuming things all the time. And this is like this consumption economy now. And there's so much opportunity there. There's limitless opportunity. And you don't need a lot of people consuming your content to monetize it to a legitimate level where you can live off of it. And
And it's cool too, man. Cause you like, I think about it like this sometimes, like you drive down the street, right? And maybe if you're 15 and listening to this, you might not get this, but when I was a kid and I drove down the street, it was all like mom and pop stores. You know what I mean? Like Bill's Burgers and like, you know, the local hardware store. Now you drive down the street and it's like Olive Garden, Chick-fil-A, you know, like everything's corporate, right? And you're like, damn, it sucks, man. Like all that kind of like mom and pop stuff's gone. And that does suck. But what's happening and what you were just talking about is it's all moved online. You know what I mean? Like there's so many mom and pop shops, but it's all online now. Like I'm a mom and pop kind of mixing spot.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like
totally.
There's other companies like mine. There's other companies that do all kinds of things now. And it's cool, man. Like the content or like creating content has become such a big industry that a lot of people can do it. You know what I mean? And that's what's really cool.
Yeah, it's transitioned all of that old mom and pop stuff into this new world. And I think probably even more so, there's opportunities to kind of start something from nothing because the barrier to entry is even lower,
way lower
than starting your own hardware store 50 years ago, you know, and of course, I mean, back then too, there was a lot of other barriers to entry, you know, in the form of kind of just like the systemic, you know, racism and sexism of being able to get a bank loan to start a shop or anything like that. And so it is certainly a silver lining, at least right now, that the barrier to entry to any of that stuff is really not there as long as you have a phone and access to the internet, which almost all of us do.
Yep.
You can figure out how to connect and turn that into something, and then as the money starts coming in, you can reinvest that and grow and get bigger and yeah, it's weird how it's played out in this way. And I do think that when you and I were starting to do the independent music thing as we transitioned out of the major label thing, and you started your own business and I started doing everything independently, I think that was in a lot of ways the proof of concept. I've talked about this before on the podcast. Musicians moving over to independently releasing stuff and going through Spotify and doing all that stuff really was the first iteration of this thing that we're talking about that's very commonplace now, because music as a product is extremely shareable. It's just an MP3 file, and you know better than anybody, you know how nothing that is, right? It's just incredibly easy to share. That's why it was, you know, easy to create LimeWire in the 90s and do all of that shit. Yeah. And so the first instance of people kind of going against the old guard of distribution, production, manufacturing, all those big tiers that hold back an industry, it was music, because all of a sudden you didn't need a studio, you could record at home, you didn't need a label to distribute, and you didn't even need a storefront to buy the music anymore. It was all moved to digital. And so it's cool that you and I in the 2010 era, you know, we're a part of that transition to this digital economy, and I do think that music was one of the first proof of concepts of that whole thing that we see now in our world where everything's online, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think music had to do that just to survive, you know. Music
for sure.
was the only thing. It was free for years. Music was a free thing. Like the labels all got crushed and like became free, and it became no value, you know. So I think music had to adapt to become this streaming platform and what it is now, where it actually the labels are making a ton of money again. And yeah, I think it became the first thing out of necessity and survival,
Well, and I think it also became
which
the
is how a
first
lot
thing
of things change. Yeah.
because of the fundamentals of what the business is too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Producing movies is a much bigger operation than producing music. There's more people, there's more physical space, there's more logistics, there's more money.
Right.
Music as
Files are bigger
a
too.
creative art is kind of the cheapest creative art that's really relevant, and everything has gone that direction now. But music really was the first iteration of that, and now radio has gone in that direction. Broadcasting, podcasts,
Yep.
movies, obviously with Netflix and Hulu and all that stuff have gone in that direction. And I think we're going to see even more of a shift there. I think that more and more people are going to independently produce really high quality content, movie content without a major company, without major financial backing, fully independent, and put it on YouTube or even get deals with Netflix completely independently. I have no doubt in my mind that that'll happen more and more.
I mean, I think it already is with a lot of reality TV shows and stuff like that.
Right.
It's already getting picked up like that for sure.
But yeah, to finish the point on the kind of changing of the guard, it's really about the big pillars that stop progress, And I think that music it was easier to knock down those pillars in music, and as technology got more and more advanced and more affordable, the other big creative industries like movies and podcasting, or radio that now has turned into podcasting, and anything else, are just slowly but surely getting knocked down. All the pillars, the distribution pillars, the production pillars, the manufacturing, all that type of stuff is just getting completely changed. And it's not just in the creative arts; it's in business, it's in everything. I mean, I'm invested in that English muffin company, and selling English muffins is becoming more and more of an online business every single day. I mean, we grew our online sales by 400% last year.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the pandemic.
I mean, everything's online now, right?
Yeah.
Especially with the pandemic, it's like, I mean, you order everything online.
Right.
You don't go to stores anymore. And that's going to, I think, change the world forever,
Right. And actually, another good example of that, which I want to talk to you about, because I know that you're pretty active as an investor too, which I really admire, is everything that's happening with the whole Wall Street bets situation is another example of pillars of the old guard getting knocked down by innovation and access to information and technology improving, because it used to cost millions of dollars for institutional firms to do research to then make these type of bets in the market. But now it takes 6 million people on a Reddit forum to crowdsource that research, and it doesn't cost any money anymore, And that's another example of that, which is, I love that shit.
That was huge and awesome. I was so cool to see how that all went, even though I lost some money in the scheme of things. But it was cool, man. And it's like, I love seeing all this stuff happen. Like the Wall Street bets thing changed the market. We squeezed the big guy. You know what I mean? Like you had, in the middle of a pandemic, you have mad people marching for equal rights and stuff. Like through online stuff, we can all get together so much easier and make a difference. Now you have the negative side of that with like what happened at the Capitol building. You know what I mean? Like a bunch of people got online and decided to do that. You know what I mean?
Right.
But like, you take that and you're like, oh, we got to regulate. Well, a lot of really good stuff happens when a bunch of people get online and make a difference in some sort of part of the world, whether it's the Wall Street bets thing, equal justice, marches, you know what I mean? Whatever it may be. It's really cool how everything's changed in that respect too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as far as the Wall Street bets thing, that was crazy. Like I couldn't believe it. I wish I learned about it about a week earlier and actually paid it some mind. But I learned a really good lesson with that whole thing, is to really pay attention to things that are bubbling up on the internet nowadays. Cause like that can change a lot of things in your life. You know what I mean? And if you actually pay attention to what's going on, because I heard this whole GameStop thing, I'm like, like whatever, sounds like some, whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which I do a lot with stuff that's bubbling, you know what I mean? You just never know what's going to go, and I think the internet is now becoming some sort of weird resource of like where things are going to go a week ahead. Like it's almost like people try to predict the stock market. Now it's like you're starting to like find ways to predict the internet and what's going to go and what's not, which is
what's trending.
just crazy like thoughts. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. That's a really good point. I did the same thing. You would see, I don't know how much YouTube you watch, but I watch a lot of this, all of these random YouTube things. And like, you'd see these little jokes about like, oh, invest in GameStop, or like these people are investing in GameStop or whatever. YOLO it up in GameStop. And I was like, what the fuck is that? And I didn't check in on it at all until after all of this stuff came out about what actually ended up happening. And then I did the research and found out, that, a couple people were 6 months ago putting in some pretty serious due diligence on GameStop, and it was in this like real funny way, but the work was very real. The research that they were doing was very real. And then, I think I saw an article like months ago that said like Michael Burry had like 30% of his portfolio. The guy who did The Big Short in the 2008 financial crisis, he had like 30% of his portfolio in GameStop. And like, what the fuck? This dude hit 2 home runs now.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like, that's crazy to me. But
yeah, it's like it's like the age old saying, you got to keep your ear to the street.
Yeah, right.
And the internet's the new street,
Yeah, that's true. And I'm sure there's algorithmic ways to kind of figure out what's bubbling up and trending and stuff too. And I'm sure there are people out there that are doing that. But even just
I just use Twitter. Twitter's like one of my things I first check in the morning. I go to trending, and I see what's popping off. I'm not the only person that does it, but that's always a good way just to kind of see what's popping off that day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. But I do think that this is probably just the first shoe to drop in terms of how this actually changes the stock market.
100%.
Because there's going to be pushes to regulate that type of crowdsourcing of information, which is fucking ridiculous, because there's nothing wrong with people conversating as long as they're not, doing anything illegal.
I'm not sure, man. I kind of see it different. I see like it might be a push to regulate the trust, the mutual funds or whatever it is. You know what I mean?
I would love that, but I think history
you saw
tells
Elizabeth
us that
Warren coming out and stuff like that. Who knows? But yeah, I think it could be, maybe used for good. We'll see. But I agree 100% that this ain't over. Like this is the beginning of another revolution that we're going to be able to witness in our life. Which is pretty cool.
But even if you just let this play out, like with or without regulation, right? The hedge funds that try and manipulate the market in this type of way, where they put a short on a company. To be a short selling fund, I think you have to be like the slimiest of the slimy, because you're literally betting massive amounts of money that this company is going to just fail and people are going to lose their jobs and just, their lives are going to be kind of torn apart. Right.
Yeah.
And, if you're Joe Schmo retail investor playing around with like options and, shorting a company on a day trading perspective, or, long company here, like that's one thing. But to be a huge multi-billion-dollar fund and all you do is short companies and then try and go on CNBC or go on the internet and talk about how you are short this company because you think X, Y, and Z, there's just something so slimy about that to me. If there's something fraud or whatever that people are identifying, like, okay, fine. But I think a lot of times the strategy is to just short a company and then talk negatively about it in the press and then watch the rest of the people follow that move and sell the stock. And then they just, take their money and walk away.
Yeah.
And
I get that.
That needs to be, I think, talked about a little bit. But
yeah, there's some talks about that, maybe shorts shouldn't be a thing. I don't know. It works in the negative way that you talk about it, but also like, you remember Herbalife, which pretty like turns out it's really like a Ponzi scheme type company.
Yeah, right.
That was heavily shorted, you know what I mean? And maybe
Bill Ackman lost like $4 billion on that because he had to cover eventually because it just kept going up.
Yeah.
But, no, I don't think the shorts shouldn't exist, because I think you're right. It creates a balance in the market where there's repercussions for like negative actions like fraud and things like that. But I don't think that a company should be able to be over shorted 130% like GameStop.
No. There's definitely got to be regulations, but who knows that that stuff will happen with the
Yeah.
with the hedge funds. They seem to have their hands pretty heavy with their lobbies.
I mean, that's why I don't really think that anything will happen from a regulatory standpoint, anything significant. Right. And if there is, there's always just a way to kind of do it again in a new way. You know, I mean, mortgage-backed securities still exist. Like all the same things that were happening in the financial crisis still happen.
Yep.
But the point about kind of the just the market aspect of it in general is that if the fear of a bunch of people on Reddit getting together to go against your short is there, then I think different hedge funds will be a little bit less likely to go as strong on their short positions than they maybe were before all this stuff happened. So that at least is a good positive. It's balanced things out a little bit in that sense, where now there's another thing you need to consider when you try and take some position like that. If you're one of these big funds, where you may deal with the wrath of these online traders who get together and go against that because they see the flaw in your position that you didn't think about. And that just shows how intelligent the group is versus the individual couple people who think that they're, smarter than the rest of us, and they're really not. And that's my favorite thing about the Wall Street Bets thing. And I tweeted about that. It's like, it's a great reminder that the brightest minds are everywhere around us. They're not just at the biggest companies or the biggest financial banks or whatever. There's great talent everywhere. Kind of like the songwriter thing too. There's great songwriters that are better than any of the biggest artists that are just, doing their thing, living in a studio apartment somewhere. And so, everyone should take everyone's, kind of words seriously, because you don't know how smart they are.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's cool about it is it shows that the hedge funds can get touched. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
And I think that's the way a lot of things are going. You've seen it happen in the political world where, you speak something wrong, we're going to let you know. Right. And I think the people are slowly realizing that we have more power than we thought with the internet, between the hedge fund, between all of us telling Ted Cruz he's a scumbag, between all of us telling Trump that he was a scumbag, if that's the way you feel, you know what I mean? Or telling me that I'm a scumbag because I actually don't believe that Trump's a good guy. Whatever it is, we can all express in pretty heavy ways how we feel now, and it actually moves the marker. Whereas before the internet and stuff like that, we could all talk our political talk, but no one was it wasn't that big a deal because it was just wherever you were in your part of your country.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think we now have such a way, and this is in this kind of cool way, to put all of this together we've been talking about, is we have such a way to move all kinds of industries now as the people, that it feels like the country, and I know it's weird at the time that we're at now, feels more free than it ever has, because we can change so much just from our couch,
mm-hmm.
Which is kind of cool.
100%. I have to ask you before we wrap it up, why were you named Matty Trump, and when did you decide to change it?
Oh, man. So when I was producing this R&B group back in Boston, this is 15 years ago, probably, there's three girls. They're all mixed races and all this stuff. And they're like, you're like the white guy. So at the time, Trump was actually cool in the hip hop industry.
No, of course.
People rapped about him.
Yeah,
he was a big man who made money. Everyone loved Donald Trump, right?
Right.
So they were like, oh, you're like the white guy who does all the cool stuff. Like, we're going to call you Matty Trump. And it was a cool name, right? It had a nice ring to it. I'm like, that's dope. And so it stuck as my producer names, because before that it was Billy Beats, which was terrible. So Matty Trump was way better, right? So I ran with it and I got all my credits on it and everything. And then the clown show arrived and I was like, man, like this guy's just saying some terrible stuff. And I don't know if I want to be associated with that. I'm like, do I need to go? My real last name's Harris. Do I need to go back to my real last name? And I think what was the icing on the cake was I got an email from a prospective client asking, hey, I really want to work with you, but I just wanted to make sure you're not related to Donald. And I was like, you know what, man? I'm like, this is just, I don't want to be a part of this guy's name or life or anything. I don't want it. So I went and just said, hey, change my name back to my real name. And it's kind of weird because not quite, but almost lines up with the time I started the mixing company.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of a transition of my life that way too. So it is what it is, man. I mean, you know, sometimes you're going to pick a terrible stage name, and that's what happened to me, you know. And so it's cool, man. I'm back to Matty Harris, my birth name, or Matthew Harris is my birth name, but we keep the Y when you're from the New England area. And that's that, man. That's the story.
Yeah, I was just busting your balls on that a little bit, but
no, dude. I mean,
I think it's a good story, though.
It's a story.
So, tell people a little bit about where they can find your stuff. I know you're active on YouTube, doing a lot of mixing videos. Obviously, you got the Mix and Master My Song website where artists can get their songs mixed and mastered. What else you want to plug? Yeah,
well, no, I mean, the website, YouTube's the same, youtube.com/mix and master my song. And, you know, I do a lot of videos. So if maybe you're a young guy who can't afford to have me mix your song, or, you know, don't want to pay someone to mix their song, I'm doing a bunch of videos. When I came up in the business, I started out in the recording studios. We're actually working in the studios, and guys like Pete Peliquin and Tom Waltz and Miguel taught me how to engineer, right? And now that I have my own studio where it's just me every day, I have no one to teach. So the YouTube channel is kind of my way of giving back and being connected to the audio industry, even though I'm in my room alone every day. So that's a good place if you want to learn how to mix. And then I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Mixed by Matty if you want to check me out there too. My man, Matty Harris. Thanks for coming on the show, dude. Of course, buddy. All right, brother. Talk to you soon. Peace.